Hello, everybody. Welcome to Epistemic, episode number 6. My name is Reid Nicewonder. Today I have Anthony and Dan with me, and later on we'll have as a guest Tom from Placing Pebbles. We'll be doing another breakdown video. He'll be telling about his adventures so far and becoming a street epistemologist and what he's been doing. But first up, what happened since last show? First thing is Anthony, you want to talk about this fundraiser for Jennifer Smith?
Definitely. Yeah. Hey, guys. Nice to be on the show with you again. So a friend of mine did something incredibly stupid 2 days ago. Or is it 3 days? It's kind of a blur. I think it was 3 days ago now. He ended up taking his wife's life and the life of himself, orphaning 3 kids. And I'm disgusted by his actions. And I'm trying to channel that anger into something positive. And we've been talking with the family. I've been talking with the mother and father of the woman who was killed, the mother of the 3 girls, the grandmother and grandfather of the mother of the 3 girls, I should say. And they've established a fundraiser to raise money for those girls. They're going to need some help, some therapy. There's a house that needs to probably be sold, stuff like that. Family coming out for funerals. And there's a great fundraiser that's been established by the family members that I verified personally. This is a legitimate account. I created a TinyURL to take you there. If you just go to TinyURL Smith Girls, tinyurl.com/Smith Girls, it will route you to the GoFundMe. I noticed that the family member set the goal of $50,000. I just refreshed. They're at 24,061. They're almost halfway there. And I think they started this yesterday. So that's very encouraging. And I don't want to start the show on a down note, but I mean, in a way, this is kind of a good thing. The way that the community is coming together to try to help these girls is really, it's inspiring, and it's helping me cope with this tragedy as well. So yeah, if you haven't already donated it, I would hopefully encourage you to go ahead and do so. This is for a good cause, and these 3 girls can really use our help. So if you would please go to GoFundMe, you can search for help the Smith Girls, or the TinyURL, which is Smith Girls, tinyurl.com/Smith Girls, I believe is the link to that. They can really use your help. The family can use your help. They're from out of town. The surviving family has been flying in to take care of these girls, and it would be great if you guys can step forward and just make a donation. $5-10 would be wonderful. Thanks, Reid.
Sure thing. Yeah. Thanks, Anthony, for sharing that. Yeah. Once again, tinyurl.com/Smith Girls. All right. Next up is we're going to be recapping Anthony's chat with Matt Dillahunty, Blake Giunta, and Ozymandias about the belief scale, which turned into pretty much a discussion about the belief map. What happened there, Anthony?
I'm kind of baffled, because when I was reaching out to Ozzy and Matt and Blake, the whole talk was supposed to be about the belief scale. Everyone involved really has some strong feelings about the belief scale that we use in street epistemology. And I thought, what the heck, let's get all 4 of us to talk about it. And when I was reaching out to Matt beforehand, I think he had asked something like, this isn't going to be about that belief map thing, is it? And I said, no, hell no. And in fact, it seemed like it turned out to be about an apologetic website that Blake has. So while that was a little discouraging, the conversation ended up being good, but it wasn't really what we had set out to do. So maybe there will be an opportunity to cover something new, maybe do a second hangout or something where we can get into the pros and cons of the belief scale that we use when we're using street epistemology. But if you haven't checked it out, I'd encourage you to do so. We, in addition to live streaming it from my YouTube channel, we recorded it. I was also screen capturing it, and I included a couple minutes after we stopped the live stream, just for the heck of it. And Matt, I guess, liked that little bit of it and included it in his Patreon version. So if you're not following Matt Dillahunty on Patreon, you can search for him there, and or go to his YouTube channel. I'm sure in a few days, the video will be available there on his YouTube channel. And at the end, there's some additional chatter that wasn't included in the initial live stream. So if you've watched this discussion on my YouTube channel, you might want to just check it out again.
Oh man, cool. So there's some bonus features there with Matt's video. Great. Okay. And also we have some updated news about the SC logo initiative. Want to chat about that, Anthony? Or I can give it. I can talk about it if you want.
Go ahead and talk about it. I think I might have to refresh.
Sure. Basically, we have a winner. We have chosen the winning logo, but we're not going to show it just yet. We're going to wait until January 1st, 2018. So just be on the lookout for that. It's very exciting. It's really great. I can't wait to show it to you guys. And also, something very special happened. We got our first song inspired by Street Epistemology, which is very exciting. We're going to play that. Or
I think we're going to have a little intermission, if I understand right, after Daniel leaves us and before our next guest comes on. We'll be looping that song over and over. So I think we'll include that once, probably in between on the version that we release on the podcast or on YouTube. We'll cut all that out. We'll just loop it, but we'll play it once, I think. But yeah, it's pretty neat it's neat to see people coming up with creative ways to promote street epistemology. I think the person who wrote it, do we want to get into like the specifics of who wrote it? And I have their details here. I'd love to share.
I think we should move on to the article just so we have enough time for.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, we could save the song. That's a little teaser for the song.
Yeah, it's easy. So yeah, Anthony and Dan want to talk about the article.
Yeah, where to start?
Dan, welcome
you
back.
Go ahead. Yeah, thank you. So I know I haven't been on the podcast for a little bit now, and I'm really sorry about that. I'm in college, and so I've got a lot going on with school. I work as well, and I love doing street epistemology. I love being a part of the community, but I just felt like I needed to take some time for myself for a bit to kind of get my life a little more organized. And I honestly didn't intend to come on this week. I was hoping to come on hopefully later this month, but I felt like I had to come on for this particular issue that's come up. And unfortunately, I won't be able to stay. I do have to go to work in a little bit, but I'm just going to spend enough time so we can talk about this fun little article that somebody wrote about Anthony and I. Anthony, do you want to give a little more background on that?
Oh, yeah, sure. So
yeah,
from my understanding, an apologist wrote an article and posted it on the 27th, Monday of this week. And it's called Street Epistemology, Deceit on the Street. And I believe it's written by Tom Gilson. He is a Christian apologist that I think he even wrote a book or some sort of article about his concerns about street epistemology. I think he's been going and giving presentations on his concern about the method. And he's been relatively quiet of late until this article. So yeah, let me read it. I haven't read it fully. I've been busy with the fundraiser for the three girls, but let me go ahead and read it. It says Deceit on the Street, Street Epistemology, Deceit on the Street. And you guys feel free to jump in if you want me to, if you want to add anything here. And it's got a picture of me and Daniel from our video, and my arms are in the air like he's holding a gun at me or something.
Yeah, got my hands in my pockets.
I don't know why I chose that picture. Jeez. All right. I need to work out. Okay, so it starts with a quote. It says, "We are growing. There are people who are joining and evaluating their beliefs and abandoning them." Atheist movement leader Anthony Magnabosco. He doesn't mention where he heard that quote. There is an asterisk. He doesn't say exactly where doesn't say exactly where he heard the quote, but it is something that I probably have said. That doesn't seem like something I wouldn't say.
It's in the video. It's at 52:20.
Oh, you have a timestamp. Okay.
That's what it says in the summary. Yeah, from where the asterisks are at.
Oh, really?
So I guess it was something that you said.
Yeah, I'm not questioning that I said it. So it says, yeah, we are growing. There are people who are joining and evaluating their beliefs and abandoning them. It goes, 3 years ago, Peter Boghossian published a manual for creating atheists. Today, thousands of non-believers are rising up to study and use the methods he introduced, seeking to derail Christians from their beliefs. Earlier today, I linked to a video showing the effect it had on a young campus Christian leader. the first 4.5 minutes are all you need to watch. I wonder why he says that. The first 4.5 minutes kind of explain that you reached out to me, and it is a refresh of the conversation that we had. It doesn't at all get into why you decided to reach out to me or the journey that you were on or anything. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think he says the first couple parts because we're talking about it shows the clip of you first talking to me 2 years ago, and then it shows where I'm at now, where my beliefs are at. And I think at some point I reject the notion of faith as a reliable form of knowing, and I think that's kind of where the impetus of this article came from.
Yeah. Okay. He continues, now I want to show you what's really going on here. Subheader, not great thinking. Manual for Creating Atheists author Peter Boghossian's main expertise is in persuasion theory. That's important to know. He knows how to change minds. He also teaches critical thinking at Portland State University, but it's hard to take him seriously on that. Try this one on for size. That's probably not even realistic. I'm going to just skip that part of it.
Okay.
He's sort of just criticizing Boghossian here. Subtitle, next one, it says, skillful persuasion indeed, but he does know how to persuade. In his book, he advises people to avoid confrontation, always maintain a friendly attitude, avoid discussing facts, and keep questioning how people use faith to come to know things. I think didn't we have as a potential topic this whole idea of avoiding facts? I didn't see that on our show notes today, but we need to address that at some point.
Yeah.
If we don't do it here, then maybe the next show. He continues, which is a deeply deceptive question. Even though most Christians don't see it, it is also the core of this method for creating atheists.
Yeah.
And he's referring to keep questioning how people use faith to come to know things. The technique is called Street Epistemology. It's a philosophical study of how we can know what we know or think we know. Anthony Magnabosco, the interviewer in this video and an earlier related one, link, asks over and over again, is faith a reliable way for you to know God is true? And there's some asterisks there. Before I explain what's wrong with the question, I need to put it into context. Watching the video, do you see how the interviewer seems so interested in hearing what the other person thinks? It appears as if all he's doing is asking innocent questions to draw out the person's own thinking. But what he asks so often, is faith a good way to know your religion is true? The effect, and it's intentional, based on their training, is to implant the idea that faith actually is a way to know that religion is true. One last paragraph here. That's the heart of SE. The technique stands or falls with it, but it's a false technique, for that's not what faith is. Faith isn't about how we know, but whom and what we trust. And then his next section is redefining faith, which we can probably get to after we chat about this first one.
Yes. So the main issue I had with this article was that sentence right before. But when he asks so often, is faith a good way to know your religion is true? The effect, and it's intentional based on their training, is to implant the idea that faith is actually a way to know that religion is true. Because that implies that I didn't think that beforehand, that I didn't use faith already to come to conclusions about my belief. And this is objectively not true. And I know this because we have the video. And if you watch the video, it's about 7 minutes in. I went ahead and checked because human memory can be unreliable on testimonies. Just a quick sidebar. I brought up faith and used it as a justification for my personal beliefs. And then Anthony continued to ask me about that. And I pointed this out to Mr. Gilson, and I did send him a Facebook message, and he wasn't willing to take the article down because I don't know why. Which, by the way, if you ever feel uncomfortable having an interview with Anthony and you ask him to take it down, he's going to take it down for you. I haven't seen a case where Anthony hasn't done that for anybody because he doesn't want to misrepresent anybody's beliefs. But it's important that I think, also read the little correction that he has here at the bottom. Do you know what I'm talking about, Anthony?
Do you want to read it?
With the three asterisks. I can read it out loud. It says, Daniel contacted me via Facebook to remind me that Anthony didn't implant this idea in his mind, that Daniel in fact brought it up first. That would be a true description of the conversation, and I'm noting this as a correction. Anthony didn't implant the idea, but he did reinforce it. I still consider it manipulative because I know through multiple other sources that it's been explained to him more than once that this is a false view of what faith is. Some Christians like Daniel may think that's what faith is, but not those who have given it careful thought along the lines I've written above. If Anthony had been honest, he would have brought that into the discussion. He didn't. It certainly underscores the importance of solid teaching on the nature of faith in our churches.
So there's this continuing theme that I see with apologists, and it could be Mark, Tim, Tom, Cameron, etc. When it comes to this idea of faith, time and time again, I hear this complaint that we are asserting that they're using faith as a method, or in this case, what was the word he uses? Slipping it in or twisting it in or something like that.
You reinforce the idea.
Yeah, he changed it. Okay, so it's very important to, when you look at these examples of the conversations that I have or Reid, for example, or other people, what I notice, and I'll speak for myself only here, but I try to be very careful. I don't even like to mention the word faith. You might have to go back really, really far in my videos to see where I might say, are you using faith for that belief? What I usually ask them is, why do you think your God is real? Why do you think Allah is real? How did you determine that that is true? And people will usually offer faith at that point, or they offer other reasons. Like, for example, they have a personal experience, or they were raised that way, or some other thing, or they think that they have evidence. But as you're having these dialogues with people and you're asking these Socratic questions, the true reason for a person's belief is usually revealed by them. They're revealing it to me. So I usually just ask questions to see if what they're providing as a reason for their belief is really the reason. And usually they end up by saying, well, it really just comes down to faith. And they're telling me that that is the way that they're coming to know that this God is real. I think it's important also to just interject here that we don't just use SE with Christians about Jesus. I think that's another little misperception that I see time and time again from these folks in particular. I hope that they would go and look and see the examples that are out there on my channel and Reid's and everybody else's. Look at some recent videos. Watch 10 of them. I think you'll find that not every talk is about Jesus, and not every talk is about faith. And if the talk ends up coming to faith, it's usually not because we are tricking a person into saying that they're using faith as a method. People are telling us that they're using faith as a method.
Mm-hmm.
They're coming out and actually saying that that's the case. So this whole idea that we're misleading people is becoming quite frustrating. I'm not exactly sure why they continue to do it. Either they haven't taken the time to research these videos. Either they haven't taken the time to research the videos, or they've seen enough videos and they're just ignoring what they're seeing and they're just going forward. So it's becoming a little frustrating, and frankly, it's becoming a little embarrassing to see them keep doing this. So either, you know, we're spending a lot of time on this, maybe more time than we need to, but it's kind of getting a little discouraging to keep seeing it come up time and time again when we keep explaining that that's not what we're doing. And it's just a matter of watching these exchanges and just look and see what's happening.
Yeah. I also just want to point out that this article implies that somehow I lack the autonomy to know what my own beliefs are. And I think that in itself is pretty disingenuous. I was a Christian for 21 years of my life. You can see that I was out on campus with people from my ministry when you talk to me. you know, this was, I had my own beliefs for a long time. The fact that I had a 30-minute conversation with an atheist about my beliefs did not suddenly radically change the conditioning that I was brought up with. That took a year and a half to fully deconstruct all of these ideas. And it wasn't like I wasn't looking for good reasons to believe what I believed. When I realized that, and that's what the rest of this article is kind of criticizing. It's this idea that faith alone can't be a good justification. I agree. That's why I wanted to look for better reasons. The problem is this article redefines faith as a kind of attitude based on logic and reason and scripture. I believe that's a quote in here somewhere.
It's an attitude of trust in whom or what we know.
Yeah.
So now, if I ran into somebody on the street and they provided that definition of faith, I wouldn't interject and say, "Excuse me, ma'am, that's really not the definition. It's actually pretending to know things that you don't know. So let's continue." No, I would say, "Okay, that's fine. Let me write it down so I make sure that I understand it. And let's talk about the word that you're using and in what context. Can you give me an example? Can you give me an example of this usage of the word faith for something other than your God belief? Or is it only at your disposal when you're using it for your God?"
Yeah, or what is that trust based on? Something like that.
Yeah. So this is kind of good because when I do see criticism like that, it makes me think, okay, maybe I need to be a little bit more careful. So I do appreciate this feedback. And I honestly am very grateful that they're drawing more attention to SE. And yet it is somewhat frustrating too, because I feel like this is something that we keep talking about. I will go with whatever definition of faith or whatever word a person uses for the purpose of the conversation.
Yeah.
Excuse me. What was, Dan? How would you have defined faith when you first met Anthony?
Right. I was thinking about that, and
you did define it, I think.
I think I did, and I should have checked the video before we got onto here.
I think I could remember what you defined it as. You said something like, well, it's okay. I don't remember exactly, but I'm nearly certain that I asked you what your definition of that word was after you both said that it was a necessary component of your belief.
Correct. And I do remember saying that faith, I remember both saying faith itself did count as evidence towards a belief being true. I don't know if I ever actually made that claim, but I do remember Bo insinuating something along those lines. And I also used faith to not only justify my belief, but to justify my personal experiences. And I think that's important to note too, because I didn't have real objective evidence for my beliefs. I don't think I ever claimed to. I think from the very beginning, I said that it was a personal conviction that was more subjective than anything.
The other thing that kind of bugged me was when you were challenging the author of this article on Facebook, that he sort of chided you for deviating from something that Boghossian started. And that's a little discouraging to see too. Like, Boghossian, I think, would be the first person to say, there are no leaders in this. Like, I'm not the Pope of street epistemology. Yes, the book was a starting point, but go in different directions and try to figure out how to improve on this. And to be sort of laughed at because you're not towing the Boghossian line by this apologist was also almost as discouraging as this whole article. So just a little point on that. You know, we are being encouraged to improve on this method, and the way that we improve it is to go on this journey of using it and seeing it, what is effective and what's not, and following the science. I think SE is far more related to the sciences and psychology than it ever has been about philosophy. And you know, I do think that we might look back in 5 years at where we are today and and just marvel at how far we've come. So
Totally.
yeah, this is all good. This is all healthy. While this is discouraging, this is healthy. This is us growing and getting better, and watching out for maybe we are being careless in some areas here. So I think this is overall good for a variety of reasons.
I think you're right
I know
that
it
it is
pisses
good.
you off, Daniel, but I think
It
it's
pisses
good.
me off, Anthony, because I don't like that people are saying that you manipulated me. That's all. Because it's
Oh.
not just about. I know that you've received criticism in the past from people. This is the first time for me to really experience someone publishing something about my story and making claims that are just objectively false. And so that's a new thing for me. And what's really I just don't understand is that I don't know, like I'm not, I'm just a college kid out here living life, and I grew up in this faith of Christianity. It's not like this was anything new to me. It's not like I didn't do research for myself to try to figure things out after the fact. The fact that you just had a conversation with me and asked me questions shouldn't be a problem to people. If I was already doing ministry and leading other people to Christianity, and I was going on this really wrong idea of faith, nobody stopped me. Nobody questioned that. So you can redefine faith all day, and that's fine. But I mean, you've already shown this in your videos. Reid, you've shown this in your videos. There are plenty of people out there who have an idea that faith is an implicit trust in something without evidence. And whether or not the Bible or whoever actually says that, it's about the interpretation that matters more than what the source says, because there are millions of people out there that already believe that. So
yeah, and I think Tom,
yeah,
I've listened back to Tom's debate with Peter Boghossian like a little bit today, and I think he
That
makes
was
the
Tim.
claim, or Tim, yeah, Tim. And I think he makes the claim that less than 1% of believers hold that definition or use that definition.
What definition?
That faith is belief without evidence or something similar.
That's not been my experience at all. That was the other thing about this article, is that Tom said, I don't know if it was this article, but the Facebook post, something to the effect like, Anthony should know better. He's talked to enough people. Yeah, I've talked to enough people, and they're telling me that they're using faith to come to their belief or to come to know that something's true. This is coming right from them. And I'm extremely careful when I have these conversations so that I'm not misleading anybody. They are offering that as their justification. They are offering that as their reason for this belief. And I think it's somewhat funny when you see these apologists complaining that we are asserting what a definition is, when they are the ones who think that they have the right definition, and these Christians, in this case, are using the word improperly. So they're doing exactly what they're complaining that we're doing.
Yeah. And we do this
absolutely.
because
to see that projection.
Yeah, we do this because they may have a good method that we have never heard of to justify a belief. And they may have a definition.
Also, it's not like you've ever done SC with people and they've never said, yeah, I do have evidence for my beliefs, and that's why I believe them. That happens all the time too. But in my experience with even doing SC personally with people, most of the time it seems to be an implicit faith thing, that it's just kind of, there on its own, that doesn't require evidence. But, people have different ideas of what this religion is.
Well, Reid, to your point, I think the apologists would say that they're not using faith as a method. I've even heard people, I think it was Jonathan, recently say that no, faith is what you get after you've formed the belief. This is something that is available to you once you conclude that Jesus is real. And I even had an interlocutor, Cherry, I think her name was, that actually said that too. After she had initially said that she's using faith to be sure, when we discovered that faith was not reliable in the manner that she raised it and defined it, she then flipped it. She flipped it and said, no. Faith is what you get after you believe. And I see the apologists doing the exact same thing. And I think, here's my hypothesis. I think these apologists realized that faith is a method and it's an unreliable one. And they're moving as far away from that as possible.
Yeah.
So even today, I'll entertain any definition that an apologist has for faith. And I'll entertain any justification that they have for their belief.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's look at this within the Christian faith specifically. If you have a 5-year-old that says that he has faith in God, is that because he's rationally concluded the evidence? Has he done scholarship on this work? Has he, reviewed the writings of ancient Christian theologians? No, I don't think that that's the case. I think people come to these beliefs because they've been taught that these things are true. And I don't think they've been given the same justification or evidence that someone who works in a university does. And I feel like that there's this weird separation between the circle of apologists and the average believer on the street that goes to church on Sundays and just lives their lives. Because I really don't see a whole lot of parallel. There seems to be two different mindsets going on.
There's a disconnect. And I think the disconnect is that the apologists have studied things long enough to realize the unreliability of faith as a method. And your average person on the street hasn't come to that conclusion yet, which is why we might be seeing an increase in presuppositional apologetics and these claims of, oh gosh, UCs. I'm not going to actually say what they are, but you can refer back to a previous episode as far as what those are. But yeah, I think faith is dead. I think people are realizing that faith is unreliable. When I meet people on the street, when they eventually raise that word, they tend to do it sheepishly. Like they realize that it's a weak argument. And I think it won't be long before people don't even use the F word anymore.
Mm-hmm. I think when the criticism of Boghossian's definition of faith being that faith, what does he say? Faith is it's a belief without evidence, basically. And I think the apologist's response to that is so critical because I don't think most people see it that way until they really think about it. That's not what they really think of it until someone brings it up to them. I know that's certainly what I would have thought at the time before you interviewed me, because I don't think I really gave it the thought that led me to that conclusion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I have heard people say they've defined it outright. No, it's believing when you don't have evidence. They've literally said that. I have videos of people saying that. If there's anybody watching that would love to go through the videos and just do a compilation of me asking, why do you believe that this is true? And them offering faith as a reason. And then maybe secondarily, the various definitions that we receive, and not just my videos, but maybe all the essay videos that are out there, that would really be greatly appreciated if you can do something like that.
I'd love to see that.
All right. We're killing this subject to death.
Sure.
That is interesting. Very interesting.
One thing I would want to know, just to end it off, I would love to know if an apologist would concede that personal experiences can in any way be a reliable form of evidence that something is true or not. And if someone could message me with that, I would love to know, because that's how I believe it. I think there's a lot of Christians that do that. I think if you take the experiences of the Apostle Paul, you would have to consider that. So a couple different avenues to go from there. I would love to hear a response to that. So.
Right. Well, I think you have work to get to, Dan. So we'll say goodbye now. And thanks for coming on.
Thank you, guys.
It's good seeing you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me again. Hopefully I'll be on in the future. We'll see where it goes. But thanks. Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye, Daniel.
Yep. And I just want to give an introduction to Tom. Hey, Tom, how's it going?
Hey, how you doing, Reid?
Good. So what's next up on our docket here? Let me see. We were just had some questions to Vamp in case Tom didn't come, but I guess we'll just move forward to Tom. You want to give a report on your latest adventures?
Yeah, of course. So just by way of introduction to people who don't know who I am, I'm just an average guy who started following Street Epistemology just a year or so ago. I'm not formally trained in anything at all, really, philosophy, or I'm my level of education is relatively low. And I want to put that out there straight away, because I want people to know that you don't need to be highly educated to try street epistemology. That's part of my goal. I heard of Anthony on, I think it was cognitive dissonance, actually. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. I started off an atheist, but I was a bad atheist, really, in the sense that I'd not really thought about why I disbelieved. One day I was handed the book The God Delusion. I started really thinking about the subject, became an angry atheist, as lots of people do. But over time, I think my thought process have matured slightly. So I started listening to lots of podcasts, Scathing Atheist, just one in particular, then onto the Atheist Experience, and then started listening to things like The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. And now I don't consider myself an atheist first and foremost, but a skeptic. And again, I'll get to why I think that's really important. When I first heard Anthony in particular, conducting SE interviews, I used to think about how I could use these when speaking to believers. And in my mind, I was thinking about religion a lot and how I could use these to speak about, to use in religious conversations with people who are religious. But actually, I met Anthony at QED. We spoke to, that's a Science and Skepticism conference in the UK. And there were 600 skeptics or so, me being one of them. And I saw the interest. And I started to look at SE, not as a way of speaking to religious believers, but a way to try and encourage critical thinking and skepticism. And I think it's really important because lots of people who look at SE initially think it's about religion. Actually, it's much, much wider than that. So after QED, I became really inspired. I saw the enthusiasm of the skeptics there, and I think that's where we really ought to be looking to promote this with the skeptic community. I think they're already interested in having these type of conversations. They're already on board with critical thinking, and they ask questions about, should I trust this source? Why do I believe these things? So I think that's what I'm trying to encourage with doing these SE interviews. So my approach is I've started a YouTube channel, and I filmed my very first interview with someone on the street, the very first. And I said on my YouTube channel that I was going to post it, so I put probably a bit too much pressure on myself. But the idea was, I'd watched Anthony and I'd watched yourself, Reid, and your videos are great. And I used to think, God, I could never do that. I could never not show my frustration. I could never think of the right question at the right time. I wouldn't have the courage to go and speak to strangers, all of these things. I don't have the technology. I don't have the know-how when it comes just to doing a Google Hangout. I think Anthony will let you know I'm just such a dinosaur with this kind of thing. However, I wanted people like me to watch my videos, and I wanted them to see someone less polished, someone who's actually going out there to give it a try, who's making the mistakes that they are going to make, to have the conversations that they probably didn't expect to have. I've already had a few where, one in particular was a lady believed that children today don't appreciate nature. It's more of an opinion than a fact, maybe, but it was a bit of a curveball, and it's trying to think on my feet and stumbling through questions. You'll see in the interview we're about to review later. There are times when I'm stumbling through my questions, not quite forming them correctly, maybe not following SE the way other people have seen it done, when it's done properly. So, I want people to see that you can get out there and have a go. You don't need to be a philosopher. You don't need to be university educated. You don't need to have a PhD. You don't need to have expensive equipment. You can go out and have a go, and I'd like to say that already after 4 outings, I'm already feeling more confident. I'm not getting the nerves in my stomach the way I was the first time. And I'm actually really starting to enjoy the conversations, and that's after 4 outings. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, is encourage people who are thinking about having a go to get out there, because it's not too scary, really.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tom, for sharing that. And
No problem.
yeah, like I felt the same way starting out. Like when I first read the book, like I thought I would never be able to do this type of thing. And after watching Anthony's videos, same thing. Like I felt I could. There's no way I could be that way at all. And yeah, just going out and talking, just finally doing it for the first time, just getting over that first hump was a lot for me, and it's great. It's pretty addicting right now.
Did you have the same feeling after my first conversation? I was kind of ecstatic. It was a really strange feeling, but I was quite emotional. Really, I was so happy that I'd done it. I was excited, and I couldn't wait to have my next one. It's a wonderful thing to do. I think if you're watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, you probably already enjoy having these types of conversations with people. You've probably discussed logical fallacies and the foundations of people's religious beliefs, or if people believe in homeopathy, you probably are already engaging in these conversations. So why not go out there and make it? I know some people don't like to call it a hobby, but I'm already finding it's a hobby. Why not do it? You already enjoy having these conversations, but why not be more effective while having them?
Yep,
that's great. You talk about being less polished, and you're sharing that with us, and I really am grateful that you're brave enough to do that. When I first started, there's one video in particular. There was this street preacher, and he was an older guy, and he was, yelling and everything. And I was trying to get him to converse with me, and he didn't want to. And it got so bad, like he started walking away from me, and I was chasing him to have a conversation. And there was a lady who was standing in line to get into the Alamo, this big long line. She came up to me. She's like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you harassing this guy?" And I was like, "Yeah, what am I doing?" It was a really humbling experience. And I've never had the heart to upload the video. Maybe one day, like if I hit some sort of goal, I'll upload the video, or maybe my 10-year mark or something, I'll upload that video. I'm horribly embarrassed about it today. I'm just now getting comfortable with the idea of possibly releasing it, just to show that you're going to make a lot of mistakes when you start out. But when you start seeing that your questions are helping a person reflect on their belief, that is a very exciting feeling. I still shake sometimes when you can see that you've made a connection, and that person is thinking about their belief in a way that they may have never thought of before. And that is such an exciting thing, particularly when you realize that you're recording it, and then other people might see it and be encouraged to do it too. It's just this compounding thing. And it's just wonderful. And I'm really glad that you're doing it. And I think we even have an example here to show that you brought along. Do you want to set it up?
Yeah, of course. At the moment, I'm still experimenting with pretty much everything I'm doing. So how I initially discuss what I'm about to do with the person, the location, the equipment. I'm just using an iPhone and a cheap tripod. I have bought myself a little microphone because the first video I uploaded, the wind made it so difficult to hear, and I had to invest in something. But
somebody's going to ask what your microphone. Can you tell us a little bit about the equipment?
Yeah, I've got it's a Rode Video Mic Me, I think it's called, actually. Yeah, Video Mic Me. So it's only a tiny little thing. It won't work in newer iPhones. It's got a headphone jack, but what I love about it doesn't have its own power supply. It just goes straight from the phone. You literally plug it in like you would headphones, and it's a shotgun mic. So we don't have all the background noise, and it's got its own dead cat. So yeah, it reduces the background noise and the wind. I think for £40, something like that. So still cheap and accessible for anyone that wants to record these conversations.
Did you end up using that mic on this video that we're about to show?
Yeah, I did. And so just to be clear, I was stood right next to a busy road. This isn't the best place to try and record a conversation, but
rookie mistake, man. Rookie mistake.
Yeah. Well, wait till you hear. I was next to a pedestrian crossing as well, and every time someone tried to cross, you can hear it going beep 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 in the background.
Rookie mistake, says the guy who chased his interlocutors.
I remember doing a few interviews by a bus stop too, and it was great for like 3 minutes, and then a bus would show up and just completely destroy the interview. So yeah.
I think this time round, I'd already been out to a nice country location, and that's the video I've uploaded with the conversation I just mentioned, actually, about children not respecting nature. And I was on the way home, and I had an hour before I had to collect my son from school, and I was driving past the university, and in the Street Epistemology Facebook group, I'd mentioned about, should I go there? Should I engage with younger adults and the pros and cons? And I thought, I'm driving past the uni. Sorry, I'm going to stop somewhere. So it was a real off the cuff. And again, this is what SE is. You can stop. You don't have to plan. You don't have to do the things like Reid with his equipment. You don't need to record it. You can stop and talk. It doesn't have to be recorded. It can be every day. But anyway, I stopped, saw some people walking out of the uni, thought, I'll grab one of these. And I was still actually setting up the phone as I spoke to him. Although I think we're starting from about 7 minutes into the conversation, the first bit isn't even captured. It was just a brief chat as he walked by. And yeah, so it was a real spur of the moment thing. On the way home, I had an hour to spare, and I thought I'd try and grab a university student, and that's not what I got.
Great.
Okay, so with that, I think we'll go ahead and play it.
So does that go anyway to?
Yeah. So
Just about God is one who Jesus. Okay. We learn most about God through the person and the work of Jesus.
Okay. So I'm going to mirror back just what you've said, just so I can make sure that I've got it clear in my head. I don't want to miss.
Is anybody not hearing it? Can you
Yeah, I'm
can
not
you restart it,
hearing that.
Anthony?
Sorry about that. Is that better?
All of which
Yeah.
we don't read as literally true, because there is some element of art or poetry within the text.
Within some of it, so you have to read it as the genre of writing that it is.
Yeah.
So for example, the book of so going back to like the Old Testament, right? So you would read the book of Judges as history. So it's written as ancient history. You would read the book of Psalms as poetry. The book of Isaiah then is interesting because it mixes poetry and prophecy, kind of speaking directly into a situation. What's God saying into the situation? And history, so it kind of blends them. So I think got to look at kind of how do I read this section of it? What's this trying to say? And then Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, letters, but they're all written different ways. So John's gospel is much more. It's very. It's theological, so it's written with a very specific kind of direction, and they're all written with a specific kind of with a specific focus or message, a group of people they're writing to. So they're going to draw different things out of the narrative of Jesus, out of the story of Jesus, and because they're written by different people, they can have different perspectives on the same things.
Yeah,
But
so when we're talking about this, some are historical records and some are art or poetry. How can a person determine how they should read a particular part of the Bible? What method should they use to understand that this is history and this is art, or this is metaphor? What method can they use?
So one of the best ways, and I was talking about this with some folk just on Wednesday actually, is to, and this might sound like a cop out, but it's not. It's to trust the experts. So sometimes it's kind of these things can be dismissed as being So I've been told by atheists in the past.
Yeah.
You know, but you have to believe in, you know, a literal six-day creation. Why? Well, because it says it in the Bible. And then when I go into, well, you've got to look at who this was. What story is this telling? This is telling a story of a God who creates in the context of societies around it, who were talking about chaos. You know, the world was created out of chaos. So it's telling a story about not how God created. It's not a literal account. There's a temporal narrative to it as well. So to not go into it too much. And then I'm accused of doing theological gymnastics.
Okay.
You know, so I'm told, oh, you can't say that because that's not what it says. It is what it says. So there's an element of recognizing that there are people who spend their entire lives working on this stuff, and that when they say, look, when you read a psalm, you can't read it all literally. You know, don't read it all literally. So if you haven't got the time to do all that study, get a study Bible, or you know, get some like simple kind of guides to things. So N.T. Wright has written some brilliant stuff.
Who's that? Sorry,
for everyone. N.T. Wright.
N.T. Wright.
Yeah.
I'll look that up.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Can I just jump in there,
he's got
Anthony?
a series which is like Paul for everyone.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, thank you. I think we actually missed it at the start, but actually, when I started speaking to Ben, he was talking about epistemology and ontology and how he was interested in these big questions. And as a matter of interest, I asked him what he actually studied at the university, and he said he wasn't a student. And I asked him if he was a lecturer, and it turns out he's actually one of the chaplains at the university. So the conversation switched directions pretty quickly. I just wanted to point out there that, you know, my thought processes as we were going along, and see what you thought. I asked him a question about the method he used, but he actually didn't answer that question other than really an appeal to authority, trust the experts. And I'm not sure how to deal with these conversations about how long should I allow him to talk and talk without, when it's quite clear he's not going to answer this question that I've just asked. So that's one thing I just want to ask you about. And then another thing, I interrupted him as he was speaking and made a note of the thing he was saying. And that was something I consciously did. I stopped, I wrote down the name, N.T. Wright, the person he spoke about. And that was, I wanted him to know that I was actually actively listening to him and interested in what he was saying. And I wondered if what you thought about that.
Well, deciding when and how to interrupt a person is one of the hardest things, because it's very easy to look like you're being a jerk or you're disrespectful, but you also don't want to have the person just run on and on and on and miss the beauty of the question that you asked about. And I love your question too, and especially when I think about the criticism that Daniel was on to talk about, that framing it and saying, what did you say? Something like, what method are you using to determine that this is true?
Yeah, he was
right?
talking about you can't read the Bible literally. Some are the Psalms are poetry, and some parts are literal. And so the question was, how does a person, so not how do I or how do you, try to keep it separate? How does a person, or what method do they use to determine how they should read a particular passage? So how they should read it, as if it's a metaphor or literal. And
yeah, I think it was a great question, because we're trying to get to the epistemology of it, and framing your question that way, I think, diffuses a lot of the earlier criticism that we're telling a person that the reason that they're giving is a method, by simply coming out and asking them, what method are you using? How are you determining that the Bible is true? The answer that they provide should be the justification, the reason, the method, how they're using that reason to conclude that something is true. So I really like that question. I don't know, Reid, if you have any suggestions for him on how do you keep people on track?
for a while, if you saw in my videos, I had like a little whiteboard that I had some sticky notes that I would write down people's reasons and just stick them on there as I heard them. And if they got too long, if there's a lot of reasons on that board, I would just kind of raise my hand a little bit and okay, well, can we just stick to this one reason? Now I've stopped using the board just to see how things go, but I'm thinking of bringing it back because sometimes you get a person who's just going to ramble on, and it's hard to stay on subject.
And especially,
But,
sorry.
Yeah,
It could be
it's a
handy
delicate thing.
also when you have a whiteboard or a timer, or even your wrist, if you have a wristwatch, and the person's going along, just a glance at your wrist could be enough of a little physical cue to indicate that maybe you're losing interest or something, and you want to take the conversation back just a tad.
I like Reid Sticker's idea because when someone's talking for so long, as I'm trying to formulate my next question or decide what it might be, if they've been speaking for 2 minutes, sometimes I get lost or I forget all the individual points they've made in that time.
Yeah.
And that'd be a really nice way to keep track. So by the end of their maybe 2 minute, I was going to say ramble, but I don't think that's unfair. You can just glance and see five potential questions and then choose one. Yeah, I think that's a really handy idea. I might take that one on.
Yeah, because experts is something I would have written down for sure.
And
before I hit play on this one, I have to also point out how similar he looks to a guy that I talked with, the Chi Alpha leader here in San Antonio. He looks like a spitting image of the guy that I would talk to.
Yeah. Again, another thing as well about people that are thinking about starting these kind of conversations. The old me would have jumped all over the appeal to authority, and that would have been a roadblock in the conversation. That we would have started arguing about that particular point, and the conversation would have moved forward. And I heard the fallacy, but decided to move forward and actually try and peel back the layers further. So yeah, it's an improvement on the conversations I would have had previously.
So he's going through and just kind of writing these guides to the Bible, effectively. But one of the easiest ways that I'll say to people is, if you're really interested, get yourself a decent study Bible, invest 30 quid or whatever in a decent study Bible, and then when you're reading something, look at because at the beginning, like in a study Bible, normally you'll have like a couple of pages at the beginning. It'll give you the historical background of the letter or the book, whatever it is. Some of the ways of reading it, some of the kind of important, and then it'll give you footnotes underneath for different verses. So that tends to help.
So we have
don't use the internet. The internet is a minefield of tosh.
So we have to
I agree.
We have to put a certain element of trust in the experts.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we have experts that say we have to read book A.
Yep.
We'll just call it book A within the Bible.
Yep.
You have to read that one way.
Yep.
But we have other experts who view it differently, and they say we have to view it this way. So one is absolutely fact. One might be this is more of a metaphor. But we've got two different opinions of experts. How would a person know which expert to trust? Which method would they use to understand which expert is more reliable than the other?
Sure.
There's a method question again.
Yeah.
People will come at these things from different perspectives all the time, and they will look at things from a different perspective based on their own experience as well. So this for me is where it kind of comes down to asking, well, what is the church for? Like, what is Christianity all about? Is it just a kind of intellectual assent to something, or is there something greater going on? And I think there's something greater going on in community and in how we live. So I don't think that there is a kind of
he's moved away from the question.
Believe this and you're in, but believe that and you're out. I think that kind of community is one of fear, not necessarily conscious fear, but subconscious fear. it's about desiring security. You know, I want to be with the people who believe the same thing as me. But actually, the church isn't like that. Isn't supposed to be like that. The early church was known for its hospitality for those for whom it. Yeah, it's hospitality for those who were outside of it. You know, there was a, I can't remember his name, was a Roman guy, leader who tried to kind of make paganism into the thing that, into kind of the opposite of Christianity, like a rival to it. And he said, I can't remember the exact quote, it was something like, we need to be more like the Christians. They don't just love their poor, they love our poor as well. And so there's something in that about being alongside what you might call the other. So rather than there being a kind of, right, we need to thrash this out until one of us realizes that we're wrong and then comes over to the other person's point of view. I think that the church is a place where we can have those discussions, those conversations, those debates, but where actually we get to the point where we say, not get to the point, but at the root of who we are, we say, okay, you might think that the world was created in 6 days. And I might think that it happened through a process of evolution that was kick-started by God and was upheld through Him, was guided by Him. But we sit as part of a greater narrative that says that Christ is at the centre of who we are. That we want to extend the kingdom of God. We want to draw people into this community of justice, this one of this alternative community that doesn't capitulate to the kind of fear and violence of the world, but that says, no, there's a better way. There's an alternative way of peace, of community, of authentic grace and hospitality to the other. And that's scary, because that means coexisting with people who you disagree with fundamentally on some things. But that for me is kind of what it boils down to. And that's why epistemology is so interesting, because for me at the core of Christianity is Jesus. And actually, to some extent, I don't know why I believe this stuff sometimes.
That's really honest.
Yeah, I don't know, but I
Can you stop it there?
do. And he.
Wow.
That was really, really difficult to stand and listen to. He'd gone so far away from the original question, but I allowed him to talk. The further away he was going from the question, I think the more I realized he was uncomfortable with it. I think he knew he didn't really have a great answer for that original question. And remember, that was, how do we know which expert to trust? So not sure how we ended up where we are now, but how honest, you know, for him to admit he's a chaplain. He talks to people all day about his belief in God and encourages them as well. And for him to admit on film to a stranger that he doesn't know why he believes it, I think that's incredible. And something that I've heard from other tips and videos is, where there is honesty, acknowledge it. And that's why I jumped in there straight away. You know, I was taken aback slightly by that admission, but I had to let him know, wow, well, you know, that was very honest. Well done.
Yeah, I love that. That's really great.
And I think if I remember the video now, this is where I start to not hold his feet over the fire. It's not really the right term to use, but I think I start to try to ask some more questions rather than allow the conversation to ramble on so much.
He's
Can I just jump in? Is it important to you that you know as many true things as possible?
Oh man. I love truth.
Nice
I love
pause.
knowing what is
Man.
right and what is wrong. You know, I was watching
Awesome.
Planet with my son last night, the second one. They were talking about the deep. It was the second one, deep, and they were talking about those kind of big kind of vent tower things, and how there are hydrocarbons being made in one of them, and that's where they think life started, for example. Very, very bottom of the ocean. I think that's incredible. I think that's stunning. And if that's true, brilliant. Love it. But there's something about the mystery of Jesus that has grasped me, grabbed hold of me, and it says there's more to it than just this stuff. People are crying out for love, and they're crying out, and for me that is almost the greatest truth.
If Christianity wasn't true,
Yeah.
and Jesus wasn't, I don't want to put words in your mouth, the Son of God.
Yeah.
So if that wasn't true, is that something you would want to know?
Yeah.
So if you don't know why you believe,
Yeah.
but you do want to know true things,
Yeah.
how do you become confident when you're not sure how you can be so sure? It's not a very well worded question, but if you want to know true things, so what is it about Jesus then? How can you feel so confident when you accept you don't really know why you believe it's true?
Do we know how confident he is?
Because
No.
I've
Okay.
experienced transformation through him, personal transformation. I've seen people encounter him in ways that I can't explain, and it's not that I'm kind of in a perpetual state of not knowing why I believe. So sometimes it's frustrating and I don't get it. But there are other times when I'm absolutely sure, and I believe it because it's the most from a kind of historical perspective. The resurrection
Sorry,
of
guys.
Jesus is the only explanation that makes sense for the rise of the early church.
Do you have to go?
Just is.
No, it's okay.
And
If we accept Jesus existed, if we accept Jesus existed, and that Jesus was the beginning of the church, how does that have any impact on the truth of whether he is actually the Son of God or not?
Well, if he was who he said he was, then it's everything.
Is it possible that a man named Jesus could have existed and was the reason the church came to be, but this man named Jesus was not actually the Son of God? Is that a possibility?
It's a possibility. I don't think it's true, but it's a possibility.
I think that's
Good question.
pretty much a good place.
Good question to leave him with.
That was a great time to end the conversation too, on that note. That was a high point. Good job.
Love it.
So can you maybe give me some feedback on the conversation as a whole? I know that I didn't get the scaling at the start. Reid mentioned that sort of as we were going through. I usually do like to use a scale. People argue about the pros and cons, and I think it's still handy to use as long as you're aware of the potential downsides. But at the start, there was 7 minutes before this video started where, wow, I mean, he just said so much that it was hard to pin down what we were actually going to talk about. And by the time we got there and we decided to talk about, I think the Bible was initially what we started on, I'd lost track a little bit. And I just forgot to ask him where his confidence was on a scale. So again, it's a mistake that I'm sure I'll make again, but I would have liked to have got it in there.
There was one point in the conversation where he said something, and I thought I would have immediately interrupted and said why. And I almost paused the video, but I just let it go. So there's one point in there where he said something, I would have responded with why, to keep him focused and kind of keep him thinking about his belief. And then later on, you kind of struggle to form that question. That's common. That happens to me all the time. So sometimes I ask the stupidest question at the most key point of the discussion. I'm like, oh man, I pretty much ruined that interview. But don't beat yourself up over it. because it is hard to form those questions on the spur of the moment like that. So you'll get better at it, but I still struggle with it too. And then I was reminded also of the recent comparisons that I've been seeing on social media to Gregory Kokel's tactics. He's a Christian apologist, and he advocates for something close to SE. And one of the things that he says, which is similar to what we've said in the past, is if this individual realized that he doesn't have a good justification for his belief or an unreliable epistemology, that maybe this conversation will be the impetus to go out and find those reasons. And that's something that I hope that this individual does. I hope this conversation was a wake-up call for him, for at the very least, encourage him to go out and find, if not better reasons to justify his belief, he might reflect on how he could verbalize it better. So, for example, he may have a really good way of justifying his belief, but he was on the spot, and he's kicking himself for not having worded things differently. So, at the very least, that might help him be able to verbalize his beliefs better and explain the justifications that he does have.
A real high point for me was the use of the pause, where I asked him, "Is it important to you for you to know as many true things as possible?" For me, and for most people, there's no thought required for the answer to that question. But for him, it was, 9-10 seconds. You really have to think hard about whether it was important to him. I think it's really powerful stuff. The pause there tells him, well, if he reflects, maybe it will have him consider, that point. I don't know. I just thought that was a great point of the interview.
It would have also been interesting to throw the belief scale at him at the end. So based on everything that we've talked about and recognizing that you want to believe true things and you're not entirely sure if this belief is true or whatever, I wouldn't want to put words in his mouth either. Where can we put your belief on a scale of certainty that this is really true? It might be interesting to hit him with that at the end, and maybe even just let him think about it so that he doesn't have to verbalize it.
Yeah, good advice.
Yeah, love it. Cool. Want to move on to the Q&A?
Thank you, Tom. That was great. Do you want to stick around?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Can you?
Cool.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Awesome.
Sweet. All right, moving on to questions. Feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to them. First question comes from Chasing Smith, I think. Can you push for the interlocutor to answer the question you asked? Like push for it? I think we talked about that a little bit, didn't we?
I have had people answer a question other than the one that I asked. So the classic one is, how did you determine that that's true? And they say, well, I get this, what they might say. They wouldn't just necessarily answer the question. And then I'll say, I'm not sure if you actually answered my question. Do you want me to rephrase it? Or if they seem kind of confused about your question, you can ask them if they can repeat the question that they think that you're asking. And that usually helps them stay focused too.
Love that. Next question from BJ Price. This may seem like a strange question, but how important is eye contact for SE? I don't make eye contact, but I can fake it quite well, he says.
Ooh, well, if you're having a one-on-one conversation in person, eye contact is very important. If you're wearing sunglasses, I'd advise you to take them off. You don't want to be staring at a person. You look away every once in a while or blink. But eye contact is very important. So
don't stare and don't chase them. Mental notes.
Yeah, definitely don't do that. There was that one incident where I had my eyes dilated, so my pupils were just huge. And I think that freaked out a few people that one day that I was doing it. But yeah, just don't stare, but definitely you want to appear interested in what they're saying, and usually what they're saying is interesting. So just be careful, and then keep the focus on them too. So avoid the temptation to look at your phone. If somebody walks by that might grab your attention, just try to stay focused on the person. Or if there's some distraction, or even if there's another person standing by, making sure that you're looking right at the person that you're talking to, even if the person off to the side starts talking, their friend or whatever, sometimes people can't help but jump in. You might want to just glance over at them to acknowledge that you're hearing them, but then turn your attention back to the person. And that usually sends the signal to the person off to the side that you're really not interested in them at this point. You want to stay focused to the person that's right in front of you.
I think SE is more than, sorry, Reid.
Sorry.
I think,
go ahead.
I think SE is more than just asking questions. We communicate with much more than just words. So your body language is incredibly important. You want to be friendly and engaging, and eye contact is a huge part of that. But just on the back of that, I wanted to ask one question. I notice that I nod a lot when I'm listening to someone, and I'm concerned that that might seem as though I'm agreeing with them, even if I'm not. It's not something I mean to do. It's just me. I mean it as though I'm listening to what you're saying. And I just want to make sure I'm not giving the wrong message. What are your thoughts on this nodding dog thing that I've got going on?
I do that too. And I'm editing a video that I'm going to release today where I noticed that I do that. You'll see if in the clip, the wide shot, you'll see my head kind of bobbing like this. But I think most people understand that doesn't necessarily mean agreement, at least in the United States generally. There might be some cultures where when you're doing that, it absolutely means that you're concurring with them. The habit that I had to break was saying, yes, okay, yeah, I get it. That might actually cross the line and indicate that you're agreeing with what they say. So I've tried to replace that with like, okay, rather than saying yes, yes, which I think could be interpreted as agreement.
And yeah, for sure, eye contact is a big thing for me. It goes both ways. Like, I want them to see my eyes and to see like I'm listening and I'm there trying to understand them, and I'm feeling like good about the conversation. So it's a lot. It has a lot to to do with getting them to be more comfortable as well. Like if I didn't make any eye contact, they would probably be very uncomfortable and probably want to end the conversation sooner than we would like. Okay, moving on to next question by Jonathan Nugent. In y'all's experience, where's the best and worst places to go when starting your SE practice? I like public parks.
Facebook.
Oh, starting out, yeah.
So if we're talking about it in general, I would say like an online forum where anyone could jump in is difficult because your conversation will probably get thrown off track by people who don't understand what you're trying to do. And they will just jump in with the typical counter apologetics and insults. So that will set you back. Now, if we're talking about like going out in public and doing this, like the three of us do, you have to consider, the production quality of the video that you're capturing. So like standing next to a streetlight that's beeping every 3 minutes could be problematic. And but there are going to be factors that you can't control: an airplane flying overhead, a kid on the trail that starts crying. There are certain things that you can do to minimize that, but you're never going to completely avoid those things. I would say probably environments where the person's passing through, like a bus stop is not only noisy, but they're only going to be there for a couple minutes before they hop on a bus. But a park is great. People are usually going there. They have some time. And that's such a big part of this, is that you don't want people to feel rushed. You don't want people to feel like they have to give you an answer before they jog off to something. So those are all important considerations, I think.
Yeah, it's like when you quiet, a lot of foot traffic, and not rushed. And it seems like parks fill that criteria very nicely.
Regarding the foot traffic, though, you want a good mix. You don't want to be in the woods where there's only 3 cars in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Because not only will you be waiting a long time, but it's kind of weird. Like that could be really scary for somebody when there's nobody else around. But if there's a good mix of people and there's some good foot traffic, but not enough to be too distracting, then I think people feel a little bit more safe when there's other people around that could step in if things got out of control.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Next question. Is standing outside a church recommended? Could you talk about the pros and cons? Didn't Bogosian do that at one point? Or I don't know.
I don't know if he did it or not. I've tried it a couple times. My sort of trade-off was I was a little too scared to go in front of a church, so I went to a movie theater that rented out some of its space to be a church. So there were both churchgoers and movie theater patrons filtering out at the same time. So it kind of it made it a little bit less awkward for myself. But I don't see anything wrong with that. Going out and setting up something in front of the church. You might want to just ask the people at the church first if they wouldn't mind. If you're lucky, they may even make an announcement to say, "Hey, Sally's out there today and she's asking questions. I think she's a non-believer, but hey, you might be able to go and have a good discussion with her." So you don't always have to do it on the sly either. You could just ask somebody if they wouldn't mind. You have to be careful about where you stand, though. Sometimes, like if you're on private property, they might call the police. But if you're on a sidewalk, you'd probably be safe.
I know some people in the SE groups talk about just going to like apologetic classes or just Sunday school classes. That seems pretty hard, but if you feel like it, sure.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you weren't just deluged and surrounded by people. You want one-on-one conversations. So just try to keep that in mind. Yes, you want good foot traffic. Yes, you want to talk to people who are holding a particular belief, but just keep in mind your safety, and you don't want to become a scene.
What is your favorite question to ask an interlocutor? I don't know.
Do you have one yet, Tom?
Really, any question that begins with the word how. Those how questions are what I'm aiming for. So we go for the what, the why, and try and get straight to those how questions. So I like to talk about the method. So whatever it might be, if they make a claim, how can you be so sure? And that applies pretty much for anyone that's speaking to you about any belief.
The question I'm really starting to like these days is, do you want to believe true things? You can start off with that. You can fit in the middle. You could end with it like you did there, Tom. It's a profound question. And sometimes you could be surprised by what somebody will say. Some people will say, no, it's not important for me to believe true things. I just want to have an exciting life. I even met somebody like that once. I think I have a video. I can't remember her name. So that's an important question, because if somebody doesn't value truth, moving on to the particular belief they hold is almost a waste of time. You really have a more important discussion to handle first. So that's a good one. I like that one. Reid, anything for you?
Yeah, I'm still experimenting with like what the beliefs is doing for them. So questions to try to understand that type of thing. Like, if it wasn't true, how would you feel about that? Or if you woke up tomorrow morning without the belief, what would be missing? Those types of things. Like, I want to understand what the belief is doing for them, because those types of things seems to be like, if you like, those need to be addressed at some point as well, because that has a lot to do with believing these types of things. Any other questions? Would the atheist experience of a day for using SE only in their show?
That's a good question.
That'd be great.
That's a great question. Good question. That's up to them. I can tell you that last Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, my son and I went to the studios in Austin. They have a new show coming out called Talk Heathen, and they needed my son's drone to get a couple of the shots for their intro. They have a little 30-second video that plays. And the guys that are associated with the show, the guys that are the guests, the hosts, as well as the people behind the scenes, they love SE. They were joking, when will there be an SE related show? So I think it's on people's minds whether they would do a whole day dedicated to it. I don't know. That's a really clever question. It does seem like they're incorporating it here or there, but then perhaps not exactly sure where to go. Like when they're done asking the how and they get the pause, they're not really sure how to wrap up the conversation, and then they kind of slip to the what type of questions. Let's go back to the morality in the Bible. Why do you think the Bible? Tell me about why you think the Bible is a source of morality. So yeah, it kind of would be neat to see a day of SE questions on that show.
I wonder if those guys allow guests on their little show, their pre-show, because I'll be in Austin in 2 weeks for a film festival.
You're gonna be in Austin in 2 weeks?
Yeah, on the 10th.
No kidding.
So if
jot that down,
maybe we could do like a post AXP show. That would be amazing.
Ooh. So here's the thing. Like, I think that there would be people that would be very excited about that, but then this is an organization that votes, and they have to run things by. So there's a little bit of bureaucracy.
Oh, okay.
I don't think that they could just like, hey, let's set it up and have it done. Why did I get blurry all of a sudden? I guess my snapping of the fingers did that.
Oh, okay.
That's weird. So yeah, that's an interesting idea. Or maybe at the very least, Reid, we can meet up and do some SE on the trail together.
Oh, I'd love to. All right. So I think that's our questions for today. I guess we can end on that song. So I guess we'll have that play us out. So yeah, thanks everybody for watching, and until next time, thanks. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. No problem. Bye-bye.
And thanks again, Dan, for
it only exists inside of your own mind. Is the truth something that you all open to find? You really wanna know? You ready to let go? Planting the seed and trying to raise the doubt, compelling the thought about what it's all about. It keeps you interlocking doors with civility. A whisper's more effective than a scream. You really wanna know? You ready to let go? I never knew I could reach so high. As I'm gazing into the sky, epistemology reaching your mind. To believe the Socratic method just might set you free. Open up your eyes, who knows what you'll see? Just hold out your hand and accept this key. You really wanna know? You ready to let go? Free. I never knew I could reach so high. As I'm gazing into the sky, epistemology reaching your mind. I never knew I could reach so high. As I'm gazing into the sky, epistemology reaching your mind.
Okay, wow. Great song. I don't know if you guys can hear me or not. Let me know if you can.
I can hear you.
Joe says, cut, print it, you're done. We're still alive. Just real quick, I forgot to mention who wrote that song, so I wanted to go over that real quick. The words and music of that song, which we called Street Epistemology, was written by Gary Munro, M-U-N-R-O, and he also played all of the instruments that you hear in that song, and the vocals are by Mark Amendola. Mark Amendola. We'll have the lyrics to that song in the show notes, and I think we released that as an independent podcast episode. I want to say it's episode 202. So if you want to just listen to that song again, you can go to that episode and check it out. Guys, it was really nice having you on. Thank you very much. Let's explain where everybody can find you.
Yeah, thanks again. Reid from Cordial Curiosity. You can check me out on Facebook or YouTube.
And you can find me on YouTube. The channel's called Placing Pebbles, and you can contact me on Twitter at Placing Pebbles. Very original.
And you can find me on Twitter at Magnabosco, and my YouTube channel, just search for my name. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye,
See you
guys.